Hi everyone, I'm Shelly from There's No Place Like Home. Today I'm starting a new feature called FYI Fridays. What I'm going to do every Friday is I'm going to tackle some questions that I either get from my readers or that I see out there in the homeschooling community. For today's first segment, what I am going to do is I'm going to talk to you about how to keep homeschooling records if you are a relaxed homeschooler or an unschooler. Keeping homeschooling records if you are a school at homer is pretty easy because all you're basically doing is checking off what you've done through the day. You know, proper nouns, page 119, check. Adding fractions, page 314, check. And it's just not like that in the relaxed homeschooling and unschooling communities. It can be difficult, first of all. There are two reasons. And the first one is because when you are relaxed homeschooling or unschooling, your kids are everywhere. They're not doing all of their learning at the table. In fact, most of their learning is not done at the table. And especially if you have a bunch of kids like I do, it can be hard to keep track of what it is that they're all doing. There are some different things that you can do for that, and I'm going to tell you there are no easy answers. Sometimes you just have to suck it up and do it. And also it depends on why you're keeping those records. Are you keeping them just because you want to have them, or are you keeping them because they're required by your state laws? That's one thing that you want to think about. And before I even begin, I do want to say, if you're only keeping them because your state requires it, you might want to go easy on yourself a little bit with the records. They don't need to know every single thing that your child is doing all day long. Because I'm telling you, I used to do that and it got tiring, and sometimes it felt like I was spending more time writing their records than they were actually homeschooling. So what one person actually said to me was, when they saw my log that I had at the time, they said, "Do you really think the people at the school district read through all of that?" And I was like, you know what? They probably don't. So if you're only doing it for your state homeschool laws, just think to yourself, you probably don't have to list every single thing that your child does. But having said that, some things that you can do in order to help with that is, if you have older kids who are writing, you can ask them to write a journal of what they do every day. And it doesn't just have to be schoolish type of stuff. It can be anything. You know, if they played Minecraft, if they played out in the yard, if they made something out of clay, if they made paper dolls. And they don't even have to write it in full sentences if you don't want them to. It could be a, like a bullet point type thing. That's one thing that I used to have my kids do, and it really helped me a lot, because when you've got a lot of kids, like I said, you can't be in every room of the house at the same time. Another thing that I used to do, I used to keep a little tablet out all the time. And if I would see my kids doing something that I wanted to keep track of, I would just jot it down and I would put their initials, for which child it was that was doing it. And I would do that throughout the day. And then later on at the end of the night, I would just pull out my tablet, pull out their little logs, and I would just write everything in. If they were ever upstairs, when they would come downstairs, I would say to them, "What were you doing upstairs?" And they might say to me, "We were playing Monopoly." Okay, so I'll go over and write Monopoly down. So that's really all that I can think of to help with taking the logs if you're doing the relaxed homeschooling and unschooling, and well, at least in order to help you write them when kids are in all directions. But another thing that you really need to learn about with keeping the homeschool records is you need to know how to categorize what your kids are doing into the proper subject areas. Because like I said, it's not, if they're not doing textbook learning and they're not doing it out of a book that says history, sometimes you might think, okay, well, would this be educational, and where would I put it? And I'm going to tell you that the vast majority of what your kids are doing is educational, and you can find somewhere to put it in your log. So in order to give an example of that, what I did yesterday was, unbeknownst to my daughter, who is my cameraman right now, I kept track of the sorts of things that she did yesterday while we were not doing school. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tell you what it is that she did and what subject areas I would put it under. Now, I'm also going to tell you that I do not keep these logs anymore. At the time that I was keeping them, I thought that they were required by law, and then I found out later that they were not. All we needed to do was a book list. So I stopped doing them because, like I said, I was tired of spending 2 hours a night on my logs. But like I said, so what I did yesterday was I followed my daughter around and I just wrote down on, she's glaring at me right now, and I wrote down what she did. So the first thing that I saw her doing was she made a board game. And that could be classified under art, critical thinking, math, and even language arts, because she was making little cards and writing little clues and stuff on them. Another thing that she did was she worked in her Pokemon and ferret notebooks. And that would be art because she drew. It would be language arts. And for the ferret notebook, it would even be science. She read a chapter in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And that would be language arts and literature. She made a Dan TDM Minecraft t-shirt with fabric paint, and that would be art. She played in the snow and she went sledding with a neighbor. That would be gym. Science, depending on if they talked about the velocity of the sledding. And it could even be considered social studies, because one of the big questions with people who don't homeschool is, oh, how do your homeschoolers get to meet people in the real world? Well, there you go. My daughter went out sledding with our neighbor kid yesterday. So it happens. So some people would even classify that under social studies, because yes, kids do get interaction when they're homeschooled. Another thing that she did yesterday was she listened to me read a chapter of The Titan's Curse in the Percy Jackson series. And that would be language arts, literature, and it would be Greek mythology. And some people would even consider it history. It could be ancient history. She did chores, she helped clean the kitchen. She put laundry away. She cleaned the upstairs bathroom. And you might think, what does that have to do with school? Well, you know what? It has a lot to do with learning how to get through real life. So that would definitely be either home ec or life skills. She wrote a sci-fi story yesterday and she read it aloud to her siblings. So right there is language arts, including writing, creative writing, and also speech, since she read it out loud to her siblings. Another thing that she did yesterday was she made practice math sheets for herself and for her 9-year-old brother. Hers were full of multiplication and division, and she did them all, and she came up to me and had them check for her. And then she made little math papers for her 9-year-old brother. It was fractions, and what else was it? Adding. And it was just, and it was cute, because then she went and she even corrected it to see if he got them right, and he did. And then he came up to me. I don't know if he didn't believe her or not, but he said, Mom, are these all right? So then he had me check them too. But it was nice seeing that she made math papers not only for herself, but for him. And I'm going to tell you that we're not unschoolers. We are relaxed homeschoolers. So yesterday we did do school. So she did do her Life of Fred. She's doing Life of Fred fractions right now. So she did do school yesterday. She just kind of did this in her own spare time. So it's nice when your kids have this extra time. They're not spending 6 hours a day in school. They have this extra time to go out there and do all of these things. And a lot of times the parents want to keep track of this. So it's really important that you do learn how to categorize it into the subject areas. And you know what? It really isn't that difficult. It can seem intimidating, but the more that you do it, it's easy. Like I remember back when I first started homeschooling, I saw that somebody categorized their little ones. Now, granted, it was maybe 6 or 7-year-olds. They were playing house, and they categorized it as social studies. And I was thinking, how is that social studies? But it is, It's family interaction. It's social interacting. It's fulfilling family roles. So, yeah, it's definitely social studies. So those are the things that I have that I wanted to talk about today. If you have any other questions about keeping records for relaxed homeschooling and unschooling, just let me know. And I hope you have a great weekend and a great St. Patrick's Day.